This presentation is titled Coronavirus. What the heck happened to common sense? What happened to reason? And I'm not just talking about government. I'm also talking about the people. Some sort of psychosis has swept over the Western world, and I'll prove it. An illness is making people sick, some very seriously. But overall, and what I'll point out in this presentation, the story, whatever is presented to us in the media, in the news of what's happening and how it's happening, it just doesn't add up. You'll see, it doesn't add up. Now, some people, usually of a certain age or a certain condition, have developed serious complications. Many have died. This is unfortunate. But please allow me to ask you this question. Does the nature of the problem that you know about match the nature of the response? Is what is happening to society itself commensurate with a virus that has well over a 99% survival rate for all but a few vulnerable groups? In a way, I'm asking, does the punishment fit the crime? But in this case, substitute the word virus for crime. The punishment is the tens of millions of people around the world essentially on house arrest, only being able to go out 1 hour a day in some cases. When did health cease to be a personal choice? And when was this accepted to be a government choice? When did that happen? Because it's happened. What will become of the non-vaxxed? Perhaps to be treated like typhoid Marys and isolated from the clean people? But if you're vaccinated, why would you care who isn't? Aren't you protected if you're vaccinated? When the wave of ire grows for the non-vaccinated, I get the feeling that the old slogan, "My body, my choice," will no longer apply. Remember Johnny Cochran and what he said to the jury for Mr. OJ? He said, "If the glove don't fit, you must acquit." You remember that? When I open your eyes to the fact that the worldwide government response to this doesn't fit, I won't ask you to acquit, as Johnny did, but instead to convict your politicians for using a virus as an excuse to mold the world into something that they want, but you don't, or you shouldn't want for your kids. If you just rolled your eyes and said, "Oh, a conspiracy theorist presentation," congratulations. That's exactly what you've been conditioned to do when presented with information that's not sanctioned by CNN. I will not only demonstrate that the worldwide reaction to this problem does not fit, I'll show you that parts of the story, as they're presented to us, and the news asks us to buy into it, parts of it are just downright bizarre and flies in the face of all common sense. I ponder why so many people are going along with the madness of what the government is outlining for society. It all becomes very easy to see. If you just turn off the TV news for a few days, just observe society, observe what society and just your town right down the block is, what is it transforming into in front of your eyes? And is this a good thing? The world is being changed, in many cases permanently, over something that, I remind you, being changed permanently over something that, if contracted by a healthy person under age 60, has a survival rate well over 99%. Now think about that. The tour bus from the Jamaican airport over the mountains to the Sandals Resort has a similar death rate. And people on that bus just laughed it away while asking for another wine cooler. "Look down, hun. No guardrails. Isn't that funny?" "Oh, I was on it. I'm not kidding. That bus is a death trap. I've been on it." Locals were actually selling T-shirts at the White House. It was called White House Sandals Resort, saying, "I survived the bus ride to Sandals." Oh, I refused to buy it because I hadn't survived going back to the airport. It was that dangerous. The point of my personal little story is there are thousands or tens of thousands of activities that people engage in that have a similar death rate to the coronavirus. But for all of these things, there's not a mention from government. They pretend to care about you over here. "Oh, coronavirus. Oh, we need to keep everybody safe." Over here, oh, every level of government is just all caring about you and your family. And they'll lock the world down and do what they need to do. But they don't seem to care so much over there. Over here, have similar death rates, see? Sure, maybe they'll force a manufacturer somewhere to slap a warning sticker on a helmet. That's about it. However, because of this virus, the entire world needs to be transformed into something out of 1984 or the Orwell book. They even have an army of trackers and tracers to follow you around to see how many people you may have bumped into at the Wendy's. How does the implementation of permanent measures make sense to everybody down your block? Everybody's going along with everything. It's completely normal. Isn't a flu season supposed to come and then go? Haven't they all done that through your entire lifetime, your mother's lifetime, your grandmother's lifetime, even the Spanish flu of 1918? Far, far bigger killer than this. It came and it went. There were no permanent measures put in place by society in 1918, and the world was just fine through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, through your entire life. What are all these permanent measures for? Maybe it's for something else. If you think the world will just return to what it was or what you knew just a few months after the majority of people have been vaccinated, you're deluding yourself. Many of the measures being implemented are permanent. They're designed to be. They'll tie the brand new Real ID because your driver's license is not good enough. You have to get some federal Real ID. Well, what's the purpose of that? How come people aren't pushing back on that? What's the point? Okay, whatever. That's for another conversation. They'll tie the Real ID now to your medical passport, and very soon tie it to your ability to fly and travel. In a year or two from now, a vacation to the non-vaxxed will look like this: takeout from Outback Steakhouse and a blow-up doll. I'll show you that the worldwide government response to this virus is not commensurate with the nature of the problem and not in line at all with what, quote, good leaders would do if all they cared about was the health of your family. Yeah, I'm suggesting there's a whole lot more to what's happening in the world than just a virus making people sick. If you were just conditioned to think, oh, conspiracy theorist, well, please assess the facts of my presentation and what you're about to hear on their own merit. What does labeling me have to do with a common sense argument that should stand on its own? Think about this. Why is it that the same people who their entire lives have called out corrupt and greedy politicians all over the world, not just in Congress in the United States, that now these same people think those politicians and everybody in government magically transform themselves overnight? And now all these good people care about is the health of you and your family. Does that make any sense? Where once they were Scrooge in the opening scenes of A Christmas Carol, now they're Scrooge in the final scenes. They've transformed themselves, and they just want to take care of your Tiny Tim and take him to the park. That's what people think politicians are today. Well, when did this happen? Why are people falling for it? Well, what have they done over the last 100 years? They've screwed you, they've screwed you, they've screwed you, they've screwed you, but now they're just altruistic people that care. What? I'm not just talking again about the sleazeballs here in Congress. What about Latin American regimes, Middle Eastern regimes in politics, Asian politics? Think there's any corruption there? Just a little bit. In America, we believe these foreign regimes and politicians give Imelda Marcos a good name. They're that bad. But for some reason, almost all governments around the world are imposing the same measures on their people. It's incredible how none of these politicians around the world have any ownership interests in their local businesses. They've locked down their entire economies, shut the doors on business just like here in the United States. But all these politicians, they must not have any ownership, or their families must not own any businesses. They wouldn't be involved in that, would they? All they care about is people's health, right? So Vietnam sends 80,000 tourists home after they discovered a few cases. Not deaths. They discovered cases, and they sent 80,000 tourists home. Now, we could talk for 2 hours about the Vietnam case. Does it make any sense? They didn't expect – there's a worldwide pandemic, but Vietnam Tourism Board, of course, there's no corrupt officials there. They didn't expect any cases. But then when there's cases discovered, well, why wouldn't there be cases with 80,000 people coming and going? They had to send 80,000 people home? Incredible how caring these Vietnamese politicians came to be. Well, I detect your sarcasm, Mr. Narrator. Good, because I'm laying it on kind of thick. If you're sensing that I may be suggesting there are actually other reasons behind a globally coordinated response that destroys personal rights, congratulations. You get a gold star for thinking outside the box. Anderson Cooper wouldn't approve of that. And if you keep it up, you could get labeled too, just like me. Yeah, I take back everything bad I ever said about a politician. You know, it seems that when things got tough, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. We underestimated those caring sleazeballs. All those corrupt, egomaniacal politicians around the world just decided to put their Shawshank prison deals aside, and they committed themselves to focusing on your good health. But I could do a 24-hour filibuster without taking a break with a Texas catheter strapped to my leg, telling you all the ways they've screwed you over the last 100 years, the politicians. This group must be different. Let me remind you about one thing of 1,000 things or 20,000 things they've done to screw you. These are the people who insider traded for a century, making collectively billions of dollars for themselves. Then, after getting some heat, they passed a bill, a good bill, making it illegal for Congress to insider trade on stocks, knowing what bills are going to be passed and what industries are going to be favored. But then, shortly after, quietly and in the dark, they changed the rules back so most of the old practices could continue. What a great bunch of people. But now my family and friends think these politicians are just caring Mother Teresa types. How can people not see that an entire world of politicians putting their own business interests aside, their families' businesses, their stock options, their holding, this group putting that aside, it's not possible. This altruistic behavior is not possible from this group. Therefore, if I've been probably pretty long-winded, there's something else going on here. There are other things going on that CNN isn't talking about. Yes, people are sick, but if the coronavirus was exactly what Dr. Fauci and these governments present to you, and that's all it was, common sense would dictate that the responses all over the world would be different. It would be all over the place because people are different. Cultures are different. Countries are different. The lockstep coordination of what's happening in both the West and even much of what's considered to be the third world. Everybody's doing the same thing. It's weird. It's unnatural. It's downright New World Order spooky. You see, politics has always been used by a certain type of individual to feed their power addiction. Is that news to anybody? But what's shocking in this case is why the people down your block are so accepting of these measures that violate all constitutional rights. We'll get to that. They're so accepting of it and accepting of every bit of BS that comes on the news. Pennsylvania residents are no longer allowed to drive into the state of Delaware. Okay, I'll stay home. Well, wait, they can't do that. Even if you think it's the right thing to do, they can't do that. It's weird. It's like the what people will accept meter just was turned to 10 out of 10. And everybody's just going along with everything without a bit of pushback. It's creepy. Anything today will be believed in the name of keeping people safe. Why are all the people around me, my family, friends, neighbors, everybody except a few, me and a few crazies, everyone's resigned to the fact that what's happening to society and what it's being pushed into just has to happen this way. There's no other alternatives, no other ways of dealing with a flu virus. We forget what we're dealing with here. It's not an alien invasion with creepy lizard-type creatures charging up the beach of New Jersey. This is a flu virus. Every single one in our lifetime has come and gone. Are we forgetting what this is? Even if people are dying, and this is a very serious one, fine. But let's not change our entire lives over it. That's what, people like me are scratching their heads at. A flu virus is something we've seen since forever. So what if the death rate is slightly higher than what we've seen since 1918? Yes, slightly higher. And really no higher among those 45 and under with no conditions, no prior conditions. Yes, much worse for those with conditions, say age 65 or 70 and up. Okay. But turning on the news, you'd think it was invasion of the body snatcher spores that were discovered from space coming all over the world. We have to plan for this. You'd think it was something of that level. It's not. It's a flu season. It's novel. Fine, it has characteristics that make it nasty. But let's not change our entire way of living for the rest of our lives. What is going on here? For some reason, people have been convinced that handing over what's left of their personal liberty, in this case, is worth it to combat a virus with over a 99% survival rate for most groups. Is there ever a point where people will start to push back and what's being asked of society is not in line with a pathogen that's dangerous to certain or small groups? Honestly, if a governor comes to a podium and demands new measures, I really wonder what the limit is of what people will go along with nowadays. Actually, the CDC in Atlanta is having a press conference right now. Let's listen in. Yes, thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Seymour Butts of the CDC Atlanta. Recent studies have shown that most of the nanoparticulates of the virus, the novel coronavirus COVID-19, they will hang between 4 feet in the air and 8 feet in the air. mostly in this range. We find much less incident of nanoparticulates closer to the ground. Therefore, the next time you go shopping, we recommend you crawl on your knees. Grocery stores are being instructed to move produce, lettuce, cucumbers, etc. to the lowest parts of the store, and most canned goods will be placed on the ground. Anyone able to shop on their knees should shop on their knees. Old people, knee replacements, people like that who can't get to certain items, please ask for assistance. Thank you for your cooperation, and mask up. You think this is ridiculous? I honestly wonder if this was a serious press conference from the CDC in coordination with other health officials in the WHO, how many people would actually be crawling around the grocery store. You laugh and roll your eyes. There are measures that we've documented all over the world that haven't been much different, have not been much different. I'll give you one now, and I have to move on. Germany has some sort of law, or some section of Germany had a law that prohibited more than 3 licks of an ice cream cone inside the shop that sells the ice cream. No more than 3 licks. You know, that owl that licked a Tootsie Roll would be okay, but everybody else is in trouble. Licks of the 4th and beyond need to be off premises. This is a law. I'm not joking. 3-lick limit. Well, what happens to a 4th licker? Does a 4th licker go to Shawshank? Is that who that guy was who didn't make it through the first night? They were placing bets on which of the newbies in Shawshank would break down. He says, get the captain, I'm not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be here? I was just a 4th licker at a German ice cream parlor. I'm not supposed to be in Shawshank. Yeah, get out and shut up. On and off over the course of, say, the last 8 or 9 months, Australians, about 1 million of them, have been completely locked away in their home. Many in Melbourne, Australia. They're not even allowed to leave except for 1 hour a day for essentials. I think a guy that has an ankle bracelet somewhere in Jacksonville after his second felony has more freedom than many Australians in Melbourne. But then they'll have these weird lockdown zones. Like Rod Laver Street is the end of the lockdown zone. So we're locked away in our home here 23 hours a day. But the guy right across the street, who I could throw a stone onto his lawn, he has more freedom. Luckily, he can come and go, but it's just right across the street. He can come and go shopping for me, dump a bunch of cat food, milk, and bread on my lawn, so at least we can eat. There's somebody probably listening to this saying, yeah, I heard about these measures in Australia, how people in Melbourne have been locked away, like guys in Jacksonville with ankle bracelets. It must be very bad in Australia. The coronavirus must be very bad. They've had 900 deaths since it started. There's 150,000 people a day that die in the world. 150,000 people a day from various causes. Australia is not just a country, it's a continent. 900 deaths. Well, Matt, it would be much worse if they didn't do these sort of measures. Are you sure about that? Are you so sure about that? We'll get to that. Again, it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but in this case, all your rights have been snatched. If just a few parts of the 15 segments I'm about to present, just a few parts don't make sense to you, then clearly the virus is also being used as a cover story, basically an excuse to transform society and move it into a new place. No, I'm not ready right now to explain exactly what that means. You want me to show you the story's ending. You want me to show you or take you to the last page of the book. You're not ready for that. You have to go through the list yourself. You might not agree with all 15, but you're going to say for 7 or 8 or 9 things that I present, you're going to say, this just doesn't make any sense why this is happening. And then once you come to the conclusion, just for a few of them, then you have to return to this. Well, then why is it happening? Because if I can figure it out, aren't the people in government and the think tanks and the people that came from Harvard and Cambridge, aren't they supposed to be smarter than me? Yeah, that's the problem. If you're rolling your eyes and think what I'm saying is conspiratorial, I'm going to show you that it's not conspiratorial at all. What I'm saying has been proven every single time it's happened throughout all of history. All crisis, every big crisis in human history has been used by the power-hungry to take more power since time immemorial. When it happens, what comes out the other side, the new structure, when the dust settles, it's never good for personal freedom. This has never been violated, folks. It's not a conspiracy. Crisis always leads to larger governments. It leads to 1984-style surveillance. It leads to the continued extinction of personal freedom time after time. You know, throw a dart. Oh, World War II. Stalin used World War II. He used the crisis of World War II to create the Master and Eastern Bloc behind a actual wall, an Iron Curtain. Okay, World War II was used to do that. Wouldn't have been able to just do it, most likely. Maybe he would have. But it was easy using World War II to do it. Just like the measures they're imposing now are easy. Everybody's so accepting of it to stay safe. Okay? People say, hey, hun, did you see somebody in Poland or Czechoslovakia or Hungary? Did you see they're building a wall so we can't leave for a while? Oh, that's cool. Anything's better than this war continuing. Of course, compared to the war, a big wall where you and your son can never leave, can never venture to the West for the next 4 decades, oh, that's fine. It's all what you're comparing it to. A deep paper cut really sucks. But you'd be happy to have it if it meant getting a banana removed out of your ass. See, one makes the other look good. The power structure is expert at getting people to accept all the new paper cuts after the crisis. The paper cuts look good after the crisis. But you're just going to have to put up with this. And some dummy right now listening to this actually wanting to say to me, you're telling me about Stalin. This is the United States. That stuff could never happen here. Really? 9/11 brought a $10 billion new agency and 250,000 employees in the Department of Homeland Security. You know, what do these people do all day? Think about it. They have a few threats a year, 250,000 people, multi-billion-dollar budgets. What do they do all day? In every case where a negative event has arisen that affects the people, the agents of government have used it to make themselves bigger and more powerful every single time. The Department of Homeland Security went along with that little thing you may have heard of called the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, putting its tentacles to increase the size of 100 more different parts of government all at the same time while whittling away your rights. Do we have any left? Well, not after this thing, we won't. The following is not conspiracy. Not at all. It's accepted by every bit into the mainstream. What Edward Snowden, and Julian Assange said has been proven true. It's even accepted on CNN. Every email is read and analyzed. Every post, every tweet is logged and read. So if they can't hide certain practices any longer, they just put it on the news and say how necessary it is. And then they act like it's just the next logical step of what we have to do. Do you see that playing out now? People's response then evolves into, at least for the Snowden thing, oh, it's okay if all my emails are read. I have nothing to hide. Really? Is that what the Bill of Rights says? Refresh my memory. The people that have nothing to hide, well, they just give up their rights because they have nothing to hide. Hey, read all my emails, government, that's fine. People that have nothing to hide don't care about the Bill of Rights, so the Bill of Rights must say something along those lines. Here it is. It says right here, you have the right to privacy. Oh, but only if you have something to hide. Isn't that fortunate? If you have something to hide, then you have the right to privacy. Wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Even the Depression, the Great Depression, was used to eventually increase the size of government 4 or 5-fold via the New Deal and things like that. It doesn't matter if most people that were putting it forth, their first goal was just to help people. It doesn't matter. The tertiary effect or the side effect is always an increase of the size of government, which by its very definition has to then lean on what little rights you have left. World War II, Korea, the Vietnam War, increased the size of the Defense Department tenfold, etc., etc. Okay? You don't think this is happening again right now. You're delusional. Government and your rights are yin-yang. When one gets bigger, the other one counters and has to get smaller in a zero-sum situation. Your personal freedoms can't expand and inflate alongside government, right? It's a tide that comes in but will never go out. And is there an easier way for the power-hungry to do this than under the guise of just keeping people safe and protecting your health? And I'm the new Scrooge. Where's your Tiny Tim? Let's take him to the park. Terrorism was just coronavirus light. The threat of terrorism was used to move government into a new place, no matter what you think about 9/11. To anyone listening, I'm about to start the list. Let me just say this one last thing. Remember, the term gut feeling exists for a reason. We all acknowledge there are many decisions and a level of reasoning left to the gut or left to the heart or to parts of you that aren't the frontal lobes of the brain. I mean, these age-old phrases exist for a reason, because sometimes the logical mind should be secondary to the decision or to an understanding. I'm certainly not suggesting that this presentation will not appeal to logic and common sense. It will. What follows is all common sense. But what I'm saying is, allow yourself to accept what follows, or to refute or deny what follows, but let it happen in parts of you alongside your frontal lobes of your brain and your logical mind. Think of it with your gut, your inner knowing, things like that. All right? I know that's a little bit hard to understand for those that aren't used to these sorts of terms. Okay, the frontal lobes and ego, to the most part, is an Alexa conformist. And the moment I suggest anything that flies in the face of what's on CNN, the mind will simply work to discredit everything I'm saying. It's a mental defense mechanism to prevent a condition called cognitive dissonance. Enough said. I'm simply going to ask you a series of questions, and I ask you to be as honest as you can with your answer. Question 1. Does your personal experience with coronavirus match what is being presented on the news? Your personal experience as you walk around your neighborhood or drive out to get bread and milk, does it match with what is being presented on the news? You may live in a medium-sized town outside of Philadelphia, a town like Allentown. So does your town look like what the news expects your town to look like, or what the news says it should look like? For example, all the interviews with 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds that took place in the last century about what happened during the Spanish flu of 1918, all those interviews with the older people about the death involved with the Spanish flu, they all said, oh, sure, we would just look down the street in all directions and, oh, this person down here died, and I know Mary just down the block over there, she died. They all knew people just a block right down their own street who died. 1918 was the real deal. Now, today, the news presents endless stories and statistics that elicit fear, elicits endless anxiety. But I ask you to simply look around you. Who's dropping over dead? I'm not asking you to pull forth of your brother whose friend is on a respirator. We know cases. Everybody knows cases and stories. But for the most part, is it commensurate what the news is presenting? What they said in 1918? Who's dropping over dead? How your aunt's doing? Your cousin's doing? The people you know at the checkout counters. You go to the same 7-Eleven. Isn't it the same guy sitting there? How many people does he deal with a day? Just because you can pull forth a case or know one person on a respirator, I'm saying it's not commensurate with what they're putting the world into, okay? I know your instinct is to want to pull forth, well, I know somebody on a respirator. Well, so what? How's the guy in your club doing? How's the person that, serves you your McDonald's doing? They're not the healthiest people. Very few of them, at least my experience in walking around Philadelphia, they're just kind of still there. I see some people. I see some sick people. I know nobody that's died, but that's my experience, and I don't leave the house much. How are the people around you generally doing? I go to the beer distributor in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, about once every 2 weeks. It's the same older, overweight woman sitting there time after time. There's only one person that works at checkout counter during the week. How many people does she see? She's been sick. She's not keeling over. Expand your circle outward. Family, friends, neighborhood, to your general town. Does your sphere of what you know match the horror of what's being presented on the news? Answer honestly, with your head and your heart. Please don't do what the life script will call forth in so many people listening to this. They'll jump right into a mental defense mechanism like, well, what are you suggesting? What are you, Mr. Narrator? What are you suggesting, that the news is lying? Please don't do that. That's not the point. Don't do that. We can argue about that later. Demanding that I explain every last detail at this early stage is a mental defense mechanism to avoid unsettling questions. Simply answer my question honestly. No more, no less. Explanations, or at least what I think, will come later. Does the presentation on the news match the life out your window? Please pause to consider question 1 to really think it through, or let's go on to question 2. Now, you don't have to be a civics expert to answer this question. Number 2, based on just attending school, based on just living your life, living in a country that has endlessly praise the Constitution thousands of times in your life. It praises the Constitution even before several Super Bowls. They read the preamble. The question is, do you think there's anything in the Constitution of the United States that allows a governor or any politician to impose a criminal offense or a fine on an American citizen for stepping outside of their own home? If you were quick to respond with, well, I don't know, I haven't read the Constitution recently, or some other snarky response that the readers of The Atlantic magazine would be proud of, then you're not being fair. Come on. The fair answer here is something like this. Come on now. Be real. Something along the lines, look, I admit, I haven't read the Constitution, but I admit, it would seem unlikely based on all that we know about this endless praising of American freedom and endless praising of the Bill of Rights. It would seem unlikely in that sort of document that places the Bill of Rights above all else, that there's a part that would allow a government to arrest or fine a person for stepping outside of their home and walking down a public street. Is it really a stretch do you have to go back and say, well, I need to research it? That's just because you want to put your head in the sand. You don't want to just face which is obvious. Well, I don't know exactly what the Constitution says. I need to go research it. No, you don't. Come on. You don't need to go get a law degree from GW to confirm what I just said. Of course, there's no provision in the Constitution that would allow a governor to impose such measures. A fine, or Gavin Newsom will turn your water off and your power off if you have a party. Are you kidding me? So the point is, of course, how's it happening? Where's the pushback? Also, if you had the inclination to we're going to just justify the actions because of the severity. Because of the severity, this is justified. And you wanted to remind me, Matt, this is now life and death, and this has to be done. Know this. If you believe soldiers in any war, at any time, fought for freedom, just in general, if you believe any soldier, any relative you ever had in a war, if they fought against an enemy for freedom, then the number one part of that principle that they were fighting for is the notion that it's not up to politicians when they think it's okay to put the Constitution aside. It's not up to politicians when they think it's necessary to override the Constitution. You see, that would rank first on the list of things that they were fighting for under the jeopardy category of freedom. If you grabbed a dying corporal's hand on Omaha Beach as machine gun fire whizzed over your head and Tom Hanks's head right next to you and his dying breath, you think he would cry out to you this? I take it back. I take it back. It's okay for the Bill of Rights to be put aside by a governor in the case of a severe flu. Is that what the dead would say on Omaha Beach? I don't think so either. A Constitution and a Bill of Rights exists for the very purpose so a politician or a king or whatever elected person that's calling themselves your leader, these documents exist so they can't decide what rights to apply to you today or what they're going to allow you to have tomorrow. The circumstance of what's going on has nothing to do with it. Who's dying has nothing to do with it. The Bill of Rights applies all the time. Is that news to an American? Why are we even having this conversation? It's incredible. Even in the case of an alien invasion, the lizard people are coming up Ocean City and Avalon Beach in New Jersey. The people in Signs with Mel Gibson that were fighting back this alien invasion. Even in that situation, the invasion of the lizard people, you can't put aside the Constitution. That's not what the politician is able to do. Now think about it. Governor Wolf of Pennsylvania, Trump, Biden, Governor Newsom of California, they don't step up to the podium and announce to you that they've decided to suspend the Constitution, do they? They don't mention those sort of things. It just seems like it's all completely normal within their power. They don't tell you that when you can't legally leave your home or drive state to state, you're under martial law by definition. By the way, there's nothing in the Constitution that says the Bill of Rights can be suspended if some elected bozo declares martial law. They don't mention these things at their podiums, do they? I assure you, martial law and the ability for an elected politician to just put you under martial law and the suspension of the Bill of Rights doesn't exist in the Constitution, just as I can assure you that the 13th Amendment isn't an Archie and Jughead comic. Now, they step up to their podiums and they present all of this as if it's perfectly normal and legal, when none of it is legal. It's incredible. Where's the pushback from law professors or people in the law? It's incredible what is going on. It's inexplicable. There is no authority that exists in America or an emergency power that would allow a state police officer to pull over and detain a U.S. citizen for simply driving state to state. Wasn't that reserved for things like where the Iron Curtain was taking place? I guess no longer. Now it's here. Why not go the whole way and put up machine gun turrets on either side of Route 202 as you cross from Pennsylvania into Delaware? Make it look like the Iron Curtain if it's going to be the Iron Curtain. This is not. They've said on many occasions Pennsylvania residents are no longer able to drive into Delaware. American citizens were told in many states, not just in this situation, where they could and couldn't go or what borders they could cross. Australian states enforced it much more seriously. I mean, they really locked down their states in Australia. But at least in the United States, it doesn't matter if you think it's necessary or a governor thinks it's necessary. This doesn't matter at all. Rights not corresponding with necessity is the very basis of freedom. It's not up to a politician. So why weren't people outraged by all of this? Why aren't they outraged now? I don't know. But the passive zombie-like reaction of people during all of this has been far scarier than the measures of any government. We expect this sort of action from government and people in government and people constantly craving more power. We expect an overreach. What I don't expect is for everybody down my block and every family member I have to be bowing down to it without any degree of pushback. This is just weird. We expect Dracula to drink blood, but we don't expect people to line up for it and roll their sleeve up. Question 3. Why was the term new normal used so much, even in the advertising campaigns of large corporations, just weeks into the outbreak? New normal was used in middle to late March of 2020. To me, it first popped up in a State Farm commercial, but it was used in commercials across the board by a lot of corporations. New normal. Now, regarding State Farm, what does an insurance company know about virology? Don't flu seasons come and go? What do you mean new normal? Why would there be a new normal at all? Is anybody looking into their bag of scripts to tell me that, Matt, this is called novel. This is novel virus and has traits that make it different? Well, even if we know that now, how would State Farm have known that, and 50 other companies and advertisers have known that a few weeks into it, at the end of March? See what I'm saying? How would they have known that in the first few weeks? How can anybody possibly explain this away, that this is just not strange? Why even go there at all if you're State Farm or these other advertisers? Somebody reading the advertising script or the CEO reading the script for the marketing manager saying, well, why are you using this term new normal? Why is this necessary to sell our insurance? Get it out. We don't want to make a prediction as to the nature of this thing that just started 3 weeks ago. How did it even get by the marketing manager? Why take the risk of making the call or the prediction at all about a virus? Just sell your damn insurance and shut up. This leads to the next question. Why is almost every big corporation incorporating the virus into everything they do? Now, at first, it sounds like a dumb question, but you'll see where I'm going with this. Just give me a moment. For example, when I go to get the hourly weather for today I use AccuWeather.com, why does there need to be a giant tab across the top saying coronavirus updates? It's weather. Shouldn't they just stick to weather? I mean, what are they doing for me with this coronavirus updates on my weather? Is it hard for me to find news on the coronavirus? I know nobody's talking about it. I'm glad AccuWeather is. I can't find any information about it. You see how ridiculous this is? Why'd they do it? The very minimum, it's inappropriate. It adds to my notion that there's just a weird, creepy element with what's going on here. Things don't add up. Don't ask me for my conclusion at this time. Just admit the obvious. Admit that it is strange that AccuWeather has to have a giant tab, coronavirus updates. Or do you think that's just completely normal? Like I can't get information about it anywhere else. I have never heard of the CDC, and every other thousands and thousands of news outlets have never talked about the coronavirus. It's hard to get info. What if during your next physical, I don't know, your doctor kept whipping out his iPhone And he kept showing you the DraftKings sports book. It was endlessly pushing bets and endlessly pushing sure winners on you. Is that appropriate? He's got a rubber glove in one hand, and the other hand he's scrolling through UFC matchups. It's inappropriate. AccuWeather with a big tab trying to show me coronavirus updates is inappropriate. Yesterday, I went to pay my credit card bill at Chase, and there's a giant tab at the top, coronavirus updates. What does that have to do with a bank or banking? Why does it have to be, the virus has to be pushed at every single vendor or every single corporation we interact with? Again, I could see if Chase saw that people weren't getting any real good information and they thought it was their duty to help out. But this is all we get. Now, you think this is just completely normal? You don't see the problem with this? Am I just some conspiracy person? Number 5, let's totally switch gears. Where is the devastation in the economy? In 2008, we were told how tied together all the banks are with the stock market. Everything's tied together, how fragile everything is. It's a domino line. If one bank goes down, it'll affect the entire world banking system. Lehman Brothers, around 2007 or 2008, was a top 10 world brokerage. It went from strong to dead in 2 days based on all these things we were told, how everything's tied together, domino lines, etc. Right? Now, in 2007 or so, it was caused by bad mortgages. Okay? Nothing really that systemic or bad, like a tidal wave wiping out California or something that would really cause problems. Just bad mortgages caused almost an entire meltdown of the system itself. There was no underlying real problem, is what I'm saying, like we have now. Now, would you say the forced closing of thousands of businesses is a real problem? Yeah. That's like a tidal wave washing all of San Diego away or something like that. That should be the impact. In the stock crash, just another historical precedent, the stock crash of 1987, it was just a crash and a run on the market that got out of control. There was nothing horrible that happened that day, nothing real. There was not a bomb that went off in Chicago that took out 3 blocks of Chicago and everybody panicked. It was just, nothing happened in 1987. It's just a run on the stock market, a run to everybody being a seller. And they still say today, without the right injections and the right moves from the Treasury, the entire system could have come down on that day in 1987. Okay? So today, with all the destruction of multiple real industries, like hotels just decimated, cruise ships, all of tourism decimated, all of worldwide tourism decimated. Do you have any idea how many hundreds of billions of dollars that is if you use the money multiplier? Money is handed over to this vendor in Morocco, who hands it here, who hands it there. It's probably $1 trillion if you use the full extent of the money multiplier. And what do we have? We have a soaring stock market, and not one major business has gone under. Folks, that's impossible if the world economy and finance runs the way the news says it does, or the way NPR says it does, or how the professor at the University of Michigan says it does. It's impossible. Now, why am I one of the few people talking about this? People should be like, what is going on here? This just doesn't make sense. Guys, the false nature of the economics of all this, it's easy to see. There's no way the stock market could be at 30,000 if multiple industries are just completely dead, dying, and being decimated. So there's only one way that this financial situation is continuing, and no big companies have gone out of business. They're obviously injecting trillions that they're printing up on a Fed computer or an European Central Bank computer or a Bank of Japan computer. They're all coordinated into the same supercomputer. They're obviously printing trillions, and they're injecting billions a day into different industries all over the world. And most of it's probably off books, or all of it's off books. They're just not telling you about it. Now, this is a given. There's no way this system could be holding up this long. Now, even if just this part of my presentation is correct, it's showing you something big. It's showing you something that the news will never tell you about, that the government will never reveal. So why has this issue, what I'm proposing now, why is it just the issue itself never been posed on CNN. What does that tell you about the level of coordination of what's going on here worldwide? You'll never hear a Wolf Blitzen on CNN have a guest that talks for 5 minutes and stresses how the world economic situation or the world economy and world stock markets must be being propped up artificially by some sort of secret, off-book, daily billions of dollar injections into different industries. This raises a few problems. Well, who's getting the trillions? Who's deciding who should get the trillions? Well, you got your $1,200. Isn't that good enough? You didn't get part of the trillions, though, did you? You got your $1,200. So sit down and shut up. While the net worth of Zuckerberg goes up $10 billion. The net worth of Bezos and Musk and Gates go up collectively $200 to $250 billion. You got your $1,000. Sit down and shut up. I could go on for just an hour about the economics section here. How there's just no possible way this could be happening if it wasn't a completely coordinated effort. If it is, fine. But don't talk about it, reveal it. Don't keep it all in the shadows. Don't have it never brought up on CNN. That just brings out the creepy nature of all of this. What I'm saying here is there's no other way the world economy could be holding up. I mean, this is common effing sense. If you can't see it, I can't help you. You believe that the forced closing of thousands of businesses and the decimation of entire industries can just leave all major companies basically untouched and create a situation where the stock market's booming and top billionaires see their net worth go up $250 billion? If that all makes sense to you, I honestly just turn this presentation off now. I can't help you. Number 6 is about the oddities or strange situations surrounding the forced masking. They basically were able to put the entire Western world into a mask in 5 weeks. If the masks are so important to every aspect of battling coronavirus, and of course the entire presentation of all this has been about the need for the mask, then the obvious question from any second grader would be, why didn't the federal government and state governments put an office in every single city and town by about May of 2020 offering free masks? And just as important, almost, some sort of hazmat collection set up to properly dispose of used masks or dispose of CV-infected materials. So first you would offer the free masks. That should have been done in just a matter of weeks. Then eventually a hazmat site where you come turn in your stuff, proper disposal. Is this conspiracy? Does this make sense to you? So a guy in Brooklyn, say has coronavirus, some guy in Brooklyn. And the guy's wife just takes his snot rags and his towelettes and whatever, his dirty underwear. They just take it and put it in a bag and then puts it out in the street in the same garbage bag as last night's rotisserie chicken. Where the cats dig in and the snot rags go flying up into your face. And do you see the problem here? Is it so ridiculous for me to suggest a $4 trillion government could probably set up hazmat disposals working with state governments? Is that so absurd? So from a disposal or safe recycling perspective, I understand not every community, would be able to accomplish this. Fine. Common sense would dictate, though, at this point, there should be about 1,000 drop-offs across the country. For the most part, it didn't happen at all. Now, if there are 3 or 4 examples that I missed or New York City's doing something, so what? Is that it's generally not happening. Is that representative of 10,000 towns and cities in America? People will do this to me. Is my argument that it's not happening completely shot to hell? If you can scour the internet and find one city that's doing it, oh, Matt, your presentation's wrong. Skokie's doing it. So what if I missed a few? It's generally not happening. People are so desperate to protect the narrative that I'm trying to poke holes into that they'll go out and find a single example and use it against me and believe that using that example, they've then proved me wrong. Fine, forget the hazmat disposal for now. Where were the free masks offered by federal, state, and local governments in April or May? It should have been done in April or May. Where were the free masks, the N95s? One of the big problems I have is how people don't talk about the inconsistency of the government response, the strangeness of the government response, doing all this stuff seriously over here and forgetting the basics over here. If your government comes forth and presents this thing as the biggest crisis in 100 years, which it is, and it says all facets of your society need to be upended and personal liberties have to be put aside and this and that and lockdowns and Governor Newsom threatening arrest if you walk the streets of San Francisco, and it's the biggest challenge of our lives, your business will be closed down, your very freedoms taken away. Isn't, if in that situation, asking for free cloth masks or N95s, is that too much to ask for or too much to expect to get from a $4 trillion government? Beyond what the federal government can do and their millions of employees and $4 trillion budgets and putting new modules on the International Space Station, just asking for cloth, that's too much to ask. Is there any dummy listening to this that actually said or would want to say something back to me like, it wasn't in the budget, which implies there wasn't any money for it? Really? I'm sure somebody just said that back. You've got to be kidding me. Just in my state, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, by itself, weighs so much money that if that budget was turned over to me, just let Matt manage it, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, Highway Council, or whatever they are, I could provide everybody in the United States, just based on that, with free masks and have enough left over to live in the Hearst Castle and have Tiger Woods as my private golf coach. Just from the PA highway budget and the waste. I'm not joking. It's a cloth mask, guys. Not asking to build an international space station the size of the Event Horizon. It's a piece of cloth. They can put a man on the moon in 1969, but 10, 11 months into this thing can't find a way to provide free cloth to people in the United States in the biggest crisis in 100 years. Really? People think this is just normal. It's, again, a strange inconsistency, strange ironies that is going on, that these things don't add up. Everybody just gives them a pass on this stuff. I actually did this about early June. It might have been the end of May. I think it was early June. I Googled free masks or get free masks in my area. You know what came up? Local sewing groups, like old ladies getting around sewing. Local sewing groups. Not a website from the federal government came to the top of the Google search. No, local sewing groups popped up. So this government pays like Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin and these defense contractors, pays them hundreds of billions of dollars and builds $500 million embassies in Baghdad with like 1,000 rooms, but they can't provide free cloth masks in a national crisis. So I'm forced to have to find my way down in May or June. I got to find the 4-H club, and wait as some grandmother finishes sewing. I can get what she's going to turn over to me at the end of the day before she takes her lunch break. That's what I got to do in the United States of America. Okay, the final part of the Bizarro Mask Oddity section I'm doing now is even more simple, more a defiling of common sense, and exposes the absurd hypocrisy. So fine, let's just assume now that the government can bring 200,000 soldiers and 1.5 million pieces of equipment to the Iraqi border in 1991, but they can't distribute cloth masks. But let's just assume that's the case. Okay, fine. Then if that's the case, why the heck didn't they go the whole way and require real N95 masks? If the mask is the number one defense until the vaccine is done, why didn't they go the whole way and require the N95s? So we've all seen thousands of people with all sorts of weird things, and it's perfectly accepted, whatever they have on their face. Bandanas. Looks like the other day took an old do-rag bandana off the back of their motorcycle and wrapped it around their face. And people have this stretchy stuff that they put around their neck and then they stretch it up. And there's not meant to be any sort of medical protection like an N95, all sorts of crap. But you put any sort of piece of crap on your face, that's just fine. You're doing your part. That's weird. If you're going to do it, go the whole way. If things were exactly as the news said, right around May 1st, again, these are things a second grader could come up with. Right around May 1st, when ample masks were available from private corporations, not from government, because government can't do it, remember. But ample masks were available right around the middle of May. They were available everywhere. Now you can't walk in any store without 80,000 different sizes and styles and fashion statements. But right about that time, there would have been these sort of announcements from government using the media. Okay, Because masks are now required, and we're right in the middle of this very serious crisis, we need them to be of a certain quality. Please understand, pulling a do-rag off the back of your motorcycle, that's not adequate protection. A piece of cloth cannot strain a virus that may be as small as 100 nanometers. They could do this like in an ad council advertisement. Like the last ad council advertisement campaign I saw was Feed the Pig, about saving. So people are accepting that thousands of businesses can be shut down, and California can threaten to turn the water and the electric off to a non-essential business that illegally opens. But everybody's just fine with some guy in line with an old sock over his face. You see, this goes along with what the other common sense measures would have been or should have been if this is exactly what the news presents. They would have said something along the lines of, even if they're not supplying free masks to everybody, something would have come up very quickly and said, these do-rags and putting just any old thing on your face won't do. We have to go the whole way. If you can't afford your own N95 mask, one will be provided to you. To this day, you see all sorts of strange do-rags and cloth and nonsense on people's faces. But the government doesn't say a darn thing about it. There's no real push to get people into the protective masks. Now, who could possibly be listening to this, it's still with me, and be like, this is completely normal? I mean, these are things a second grader would come up with. Are they trying to protect people or not? 7. In the opening weeks of COVID-19, in, say, March of 2020, all the defense that was available for people were the masks and what people could do on their own, which is, remember, their natural immunity. That's all they had early on. It's all most people have now. They have the mask and their natural immunity. It's two things, 50% of the whole defense. So why was the most important thing, some would say natural immunity is more important than a mask, why was the most important thing completely overlooked by government, all forms of media? There was just basically not a mention of it. Where was the 6-month push by government to educate people on the only thing they had to fall back on, their natural immunity, with reminders about the best ways to boost one's immune system? Where were the ad council TV ads, newspaper ads, NPR radio spots on natural immunity? Remember what you can do for yourself. They didn't exist. And this is unfathomable. Why? Think about it. What possible script are you pulling forth to give an excuse as to why this wasn't the number one highlight of the first 6 months? So someone right now is probably trying to say to me, if they could talk back to me, oh, well, that's just common sense. I mean, we all know we have to do what's best for our immune system. That's unnecessary. Really? Isn't wash your hands common sense? How many times did they talk about that? Millions? How many times did they talk about natural immunity boosters? 0? How many hundreds of times have you heard wash your hands? I've heard like 50 times you have to sing happy birthday or something twice. And if you do happy birthday once, that's not adequate hand washing. So general government ads, reminders, ad council, TV spots, a reminder about getting enough sleep, reminder about vitamin C, low stress, good foods, different theories on different supplements like zinc or whatever doctors are recommending. Dr. Fauci can just give no advice here. Where was all of that? Would that have been such a terrible thing if that's all the ammo that they had to work with at the time? So they put the entire world in a mask in 5 weeks, but they couldn't have waged a similar campaign to get people to make better choices to improve their bodies and reduce stress. They changed behavior with the mask. They did that. But they didn't even attempt to change behavior for making your body more healthy. They didn't do a thing there. Why not? I can come up with this, a second grader can, but the top minds in the world can't. Or like Matt, something else something's amiss here. There's things going on that we don't truly understand. You want to call me conspiracy? Call me whatever name you want. But you're not going to be able to poke holes with this second grade common sense argument. Well, Matt, what could they have done? Let's get the second graders in the room again. They come up with 50 things in about 10 minutes. I don't know. They create a more relaxing culture. Stress, sleep. This is very important to immunity. Everybody would say this, no matter what side you're on, no matter what doctor group. Stress levels, anxiety, immunity, sleep, the most important stuff. They could have worked to create a more relaxing culture in thousands of different areas. This is a horrible example. It just came to me. I wrote it down. Push the stock market opening back to 11 a.m. and extend it later. So 40,000 workers and traders and stock people and finance people on the West Coast don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. I mean, I'm not putting my full energy into protecting bankers and traders. It's a bad example, I know. But it's just, there's still a lot of people that work in the finance industry that are good people that literally, a lot of them get up at 4 a.m. because of the time difference when the market opens to prepare, just things like that. It's just, I know it's not a good example, but eighth graders in a study hall could come up with a list of 50 things like this. How about government passing out free zinc or vitamin C or multivitamins to those who can't afford it? They can't do that. No budget for it. Put a man on the moon in 1969. Nothing along these lines were done. Nothing. A caring, loving government with politicians that only care about your health would have put this stuff out like crazy in radio ads or TV spots. This doesn't exist. I could write this in 30 seconds. Where was this? They'd have put something out that says, the federal government, working with university laboratories and the pharmaceutical industry, will work on a vaccine with our full effort to beat coronavirus, but this will take time. Until that time, you must rely on what has always been your number one defense, your natural immunity. Remember, everyone is exposed to the flu in a regular flu season, but the majority of people don't get it. That's because their immune systems are strong. Here's a reminder of the top 10 things a person can do to turbocharge your immune system and natural defenses. Guys, that didn't exist. And you want to call me a conspiracy theorist. Through well-executed campaigns and planning and government working with employers, they could have worked with employers to push them to ease stress on employees in a variety of different creative ways. The government could have funded an immediate type of unemployment and put the word out. People are stressed. I'm going to lose my job. I work at a theme park or on a cruise ship. So thousands of layoffs could have been avoided. I know they have a very robust unemployment, but this is the way they went about doing it. It was all on the back end. You couldn't, if you were President Trump's counsel, just say, we want to get out to people right away and say, in the first few weeks, say you will not lose your paycheck because of coronavirus, at least for for a 6-month period. Government stepping up. They couldn't have done anything like that. Well, they had the money. They did the $1 trillion stimulus on the back end after everybody was all stressed out. Everybody knows that stress and anxiety breeds disease. Okay? Nobody would argue with that. What facilitates the spread of coronavirus, then, if you had to pick one, well, a layoff notice in somebody's hand as they picture their tiny Tim at home hungry. Lots of stress there. Or a federal government announcing, and it's very, very quickly in the first few weeks, that everyone's paycheck will be protected for at least a 6-month period. And if you're not working or you're a theme park worker, blah, 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 if you're an actor in Hamilton because the play shut down, you will not lose your paycheck or your benefits. They could have done that right away instead of doing it on the back end with stimulus. How do I get the money? It's all back end stuff. The stress is already set in. This is second grade stuff. And what money it would have cost them is the same in either case. The lowering of stress supports natural immunity. So I, in a few minutes, can come up with some ideas just on the fly, just some schlep sitting here, but the smartest people in the world can't think of these things. Keep going and going. Put the 8th graders in the room. They come up with 1,000 things that the government could have done to help people with their natural immunity. None of it was done. Is anybody actually going to try to talk to me right now about separation of powers and government separate, and they can't impose anything on corporations? And if corporations want to lay off people, they're allowed to because corporations are in no way influenced by government, and we have freedom here in the United States and the Constitution. Does anybody want to say that after they broke all the rules on personal freedom? After they said I can't even go in to get bread without a mask, Governor Newsom said he's going to arrest people that walk down the streets of San Francisco. So all that destruction of rights is fine, but because that's all in the name of protecting people. But governments going to businesses saying make sure you don't lay off everybody. See, that breakdown of freedom is not fine. See, you at least be consistent. My God, let's not lose the big picture here. somebody that wants to defend their masters and argue with me at every point will absolutely latch on to some of the things I just said and use that against me. The big picture is here. They didn't mention a damn thing about what you could do for your own personal immunity. Explain that one. 8. Do you think the coordination and unity of approach amongst almost every government in the world is normal? Didn't it seem a bit strange to you? Meaning, not just in the United States, not just in Canada and France, but South American governments and Asian governments and governments in different parts of what's called the Third World, they all moved to lock down citizens and impose the mask. But because these countries have no constitutional protections, people were fined and arrested if they didn't follow the orders. They went a bit farther than they did in, say, the United States, although the approach and the measures put in place were essentially the same thing. Now, if anybody is saying, well, of course all these governments around the world put in the same measures. Who wants to get sick? They wanted to keep it to a minimum. Well, that may be the most naive answer in the history of the world. It's what I alluded to in the opening of this presentation. The politics, the politicians, the diplomats, the dictators, prime ministers, most of the rest of the world is not the government that is presented in the United States, like democracy, freedom. Most of the rest of the world doesn't have that, but they all imposed the same measures. Do you really think the slime of all slime, these third world dictators and corrupt regimes, they're just willing to sacrifice their entire economy just to save lives? Do you think that those slime really care? Are you kidding me? The Vietnamese politicians, as I mentioned, sent 80,000 people packing, 80,000 tourists packing, just because of a few cases in the country. And they and their families, you're assuming the Vietnamese politicians that made that decision, they didn't have like $1 billion of business interests to protect. All they cared about was people's health. Even if they did care, it just was about caring. That's a big if, by the way. They would have closed the country. They would have done something that made more sense, like middle of the ground. They would have closed the country to new tourists because of a few cases, not kicked out 80,000 original tourists, like that scene in Sling Blade where Doyle, Nasty Doyle from the movie Sling Blade, kicks out the band. Randy, y'all buzzards, get out of my house. That's what Vietnam did to 80,000 tourists. They would if you got kicked out, you'd get pissed off. You wouldn't come back. Their billions of dollars wouldn't be spent there. They'd say, okay, we want to protect people's health. No more tourists coming in. When you 80,000 are looking to leave at the end of the week, you can leave, but nobody else coming in. You don't think they would have done that middle of the road measure? They just would have kicked 80,000 people out because of a few cases? How does that make sense to anybody? 9. Don't you find it odd that they were hiring an army of coronavirus trackers and tracers to be working in all 50 states and all major cities? They were doing this massive hiring as of March of 2020 into early April. It happened very, very quickly. Now, if this isn't a big deal to you, the point is, how could they have known so early on exactly what they were dealing with? Even if it's novel and different, well, you'd have to see how it plays out. Every flu season in 100 years has come and gone, but you're gonna hire tens of thousands of people's trackers and tracers. It was a permanent infrastructure put in place just weeks into it. How would they have known? The tracking and tracing army grows even today. Just like any new implementation of government grows, cements itself in, and never goes away. It was like it was planned. Bill Gates with Johns Hopkins University held that Event 201 about a national coronavirus pandemic 3 or 4 months before it broke out, before a mention of it. Look up Bill Gates, Johns Hopkins University, Event 201. I'm not making it up. They war gamed exactly what happened 4 months later. And you're going to call me some kind of conspiracy theorist. 10. The 2018 official statistics say that 1.5 million people died of TB. 2018, tuberculosis, 1.5 million dead. Coronavirus, I think officially as of this recording, early 2021, it's about 2 million. So for a flu with a 99% survival rate for healthy groups, we have the entire world put into masks, about a third of the world in some sort of severe lockdown. A third of the world is basically in prison. Okay, this is undeniable in terms of putting it in those terms. Severe lockdown, martial law, curfew, whether you think it's necessary or not. Think about that. A third of the world is in prison right now. 2 million deaths are about. Okay, could increase. 2018 tuberculosis, 1.5 million. And there wasn't a mention of anything about tuberculosis. Who went into lockdown over that? Nobody. What provisions were put in place where you couldn't go into certain public places without a mask? Nothing was done. Nothing happened. 1.5 million. Nothing was done, but on a similar type of scale, which is becoming larger, but similar, the whole world is being transformed, and a third of the world is basically in prison, house arrest. That just makes perfect sense to you. Then, again, my argument is failing. 11. According to statistics, car accident deaths in the United States are similar to coronavirus deaths. Car accident deaths much, much worse, of course, for groups 20 to 30 years old. But let's just say similar death-to-death percentage without getting into the details. Incredibly, at least in Pennsylvania where I live, there are thousands of people I've seen driving around over the last 10 months or so. Everybody I've passed, I haven't looked into everybody's front windshield, but you see thousands of people driving around in their cars by themselves with their mask on. Okay, statistically, I would say when the news really ramps up, that there's a second wave and all that, it's like 1 out of 10 people you see driving around outside Philadelphia with a mask on, but they're by themselves in the car. But you think, well, if they're interested in, what are they interested in doing? Why do they have the mask on? Well, they're trying to be safe. They're trying to protect their own health, their own body, their own lives. There's no other reason for it. They're not doing it for a fashion statement. It's about staying safe, staying alive. Well, then you think, why don't they drive around with a motorcycle helmet on? Statistically, driving around with a motorcycle helmet on would do far more to protect life than driving around with an N95 mask when you're in the car by yourself. But nobody will do that. People will do the former. They'll drive around with the mask on. It's just a way of pointing out how the logic or the lack of logic that goes through people's heads. They're not acting via their own common sense and thinking things through. They're just simply reacting to the news and bowing down to everything that that they think their governor would want them to do. It's just incredible how mindless people have become. 12. Do you find it strange that from January of 2020 through July or so, Hong Kong, Hong Kong, one of the largest cities in the world, only had 3 deaths from COVID-19? Well, is coronavirus the most virulent and deadly flu in 100 years or not? That's what they told us, right? You remember how they stressed its ability to spread, or the R0 value was much, much higher. The spreading ability was much, much higher than a regular flu. So based on this, the head of Harvard Virology, in some 60 Minutes interview, I think it was March of 2020, he said, we expect 3/4 of the world or 3/5 of the world. I forget exactly, but he said most of the world, up to 70%, will get coronavirus. The head of Harvard Virology said that. Okay, so everybody would say, all the experts told us how incredibly fast it spread. Hong Kong, 3 deaths. What? For the first 5 or 6 months into it, 3 deaths. Now, Hong Kong has a population density that is in the top 3 in the world. It's like 7 million people packed into a little tiny area. It should spread the coronavirus there like syphilis would spread around a whorehouse in dead wood. There are many affluent people, but most people in Hong Kong, for the most part, are packed on top of each other. They don't have an acre of land there. There are also, just like any big city, many poor areas. There's back alley crime areas and poor places. Haven't you ever seen any Bruce Lee movies? A lot of them shot in Hong Kong. A lot of those type of slum areas, even though overall it's affluent. You've seen their packed subways in videos and pictures. You've seen their packed trains. How could they have had 3 deaths for about 6 months? Was there some sort of unknown reason, some strange fermentation took place in the lo mein noodles of Hong Kong that in some way mimics the new Pfizer vaccine? People were eating their lo mein and getting vaccinated and developing immunity and didn't even know about it? There's something in the air in Hong Kong that protects the people that we can maybe bottle it up and bring it back here? And we've heard at the time how ravaged at the time, early on, Italy was just ravaged from the coronavirus, just mass death. But at the same exact time, there was nothing going on in Hong Kong. How's that possible? So they know for sure, right, that it started in Wuhan, China, right? No denying that. Do you know how many people were traveling back and forth from Wuhan, that district, a huge business district of China? How many people were going back between Wuhan and Hong Kong daily? Potentially up to 10,000 people a day on a work day around December of 2019, right when the outbreak was starting. 10,000 people a day to Hong Kong, to Wuhan, back. If I'm right, I haven't surveyed every Chinese person. Maybe at the minimum it's 5,000 to 6,000 a day. Guess what? Diseases spread around for a few weeks before the first case is isolated and discovered, right? Do you think that government is just some omnipotent God that just can find the very first case, grab and tag the first guy who gets coronavirus, and then they can announce it's this new thing and just from the first case? Or do you think it might spread around for 4 or 6 weeks before they truly understand what's going on? Even if that was the case, and they just isolated it immediately. The first case just rode on a Hong Kong subway, right? Or one of the first cases, one of the first people coming and going from Wuhan probably made his way back to Hong Kong. Nobody in Wuhan that got it initially made their way back to Hong Kong with thousands of people coming and going. You ever hear the term packed like sardines? That's the Hong Kong subway. It makes the London Tube look like, it's a private cabin on the Titanic. So Italy, that was ravaged by coronavirus, had like 20 people probably flying back and forth a week to Wuhan, But Hong Kong during the same time had like 50,000 people that had come and gone to Wuhan and came back to Hong Kong. And they have 3 deaths. Now with this one especially, people have all sorts of ready-made excuses prepared. And my favorite and the most pathetic is, they know how to handle it in Hong Kong. What? What does that even mean? But then they combine it with, they're already used to wearing masks. What? Now, I agree. In these Asian cities, they were wearing masks more than in Rome or in New York City. I'll give you that. But it was mostly due to pollution. If you looked at pictures of crowds in Hong Kong or a lot of Asian cities, you'd have like 10 up to 20% of people in masks. Well, how was that helping the entire population of 7 million people during the 4 weeks or so it was being spread around where they hadn't pointed at it, hadn't isolated, hadn't known exactly what they were dealing with? Again, governments don't know exactly what they're dealing with it on the very first day of the very first case. It spreads around for 4 to 6 weeks before they could point at it, obviously. So what if 20% of them were in masks? And even if they do, quote, know how to deal with it, well, nobody, as it spreads around for the first 4 to 6 weeks, nobody even knows it exists. There's nothing to know how to deal with. It's the most nonsensical BS that people throw at you. They believe it. But it would need to be, Hong Kong would need to be 100% mass culture to make that lame argument that they know how to handle it in Hong Kong. I mean, even if that's the case, and in Hong Kong had put themselves in masks since 1973, does 3 deaths make any sense to you? With tens of thousands of people coming and going over the key points of December 2019 through February of 2020? It takes pure sophistry to explain away that they only had 3 deaths in Hong Kong for about 6 months. Right now, they only have 173. So at no point it really started to go crazy with spreading and 7 million people living on top of each other. Only 173 deaths now. They know how to handle it. That's a fallacy. It's a fallacy of perfect compliance. They know how to handle it assumes everyone is equally competent to handle it. That's impossible in 7 million people. You're going to have all different types. people with 7 million people packed on top of each other, you're going to have 1 million people out of those 7 million that are in a category that they can't handle it. They have no idea how to handle it. You're going to have 1 million people that just can't comply, homeless, criminals, people who simply don't care and won't comply, will get up and talk in someone's face and get spit back and forth because they forget, older people, dementia, people too dumb to properly comply, or, they have some sort of mental issue, workers who must travel in close proximity in vans that clean carpets or ride in a dump truck together, 3 guys in a dump truck, or trashmen that have to ride together, that, you're going to have 1 million people that can't comply. People throw at me this, that if everybody would just comply, we'd be out of this. 20% of any population can't comply for these reasons. Is this so hard to understand? The fallacy of perfect compliance, that's literal lunacy. Plus, because of the cost of living, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of apartment buildings where the occupancy for the 2 bedrooms should be 2 or 3, and it's 5 or 7 because of the cost of living, or poor migrant workers that have come into Hong Kong to work for the affluent. You think they just go home and they don't have any kids and they live in 1 2-bedroom place by themselves? No, there's probably like 7 people crammed in there. So 3 deaths. Don't ask me, well, you tell me, Mr. Narrator, what's going on. I'm not here to do that, right? I'm here to tell you that the whole story of this coronavirus thing on multiple fronts just breaks down. It doesn't hold up from a common sense perspective. What are we up to? We're going on to number 13. Here it is, 13. Where are the dissenting voices in all of this? No dissenting voice from a professor or a celebrity or ex-politician or Newt Gingrich popping up or an ex-singer. Where's the dissenting voices? Everybody's marching to the exact same tune. Isn't there a single good point that I mentioned in the last hour? Just all of it just was nonsense. I didn't have a single good point, even about the Constitution. Not a single person with access to a microphone or a news broadcast or once was popular celebrity or and nobody at all respects the Constitution. Everything I just said about everything flying in the face of the Bill of Rights, it just, nobody sees what I and a second grader can see there. I just made that up. It's easy enough to check the laws and the executive's orders to see what would fly in the face of the Constitution, what allows a governor to do this or what allows a governor not to do that. Again, I don't need to prove that. It's 100% what I'm saying about the Constitution. Governor Gavin Newsom has no authority to do any of these things. You're just walking down a San Francisco street. So I know you're grasping, or many people are grasping, for some sort of reply that protects the official narrative. Well, Mr. Presenter, it's not that simple. It can't be simply, as simple as you put it forth. There's a lot of things you must be missing. I'm not missing anything. We've been told our entire lives that every law or statute must be supported by the Constitution. And the Constitution was just one part of the last 10 parts of the presentation that I just made. But the point here is, does it make sense? Does it seem a bit strange that everybody that has a prominent voice or is some sort of celebrity that can get access to a microphone where people can listen, a ex-governor or governor or ex-senator, Hollywood actor or musician, or, every public person seems to be putting forth the exact same narrative on this. Nobody's saying, hey, what are we doing over here? This won't work. They're breaking the law over here. Not one dissenting voice. Maybe there's one I missed. Again, someone will go find, Randy Quaid again freaking out about this or whatever. Be like, no, you're wrong in your presentation. Randy Quaid freaked out. So they'll go find one thing I missed, and that will destroy, I guess, my entire argument. Talk about a whole world marching to the same strange tune. They all high step together like a North Korean military birthday party celebration for the little fat man. Whether it be from Tom Hanks to government officials at all levels, they all push that the mask is some kind of panacea. It will, it's so perfect in its protection, even though many people would say, obviously, the nanometer size of a virus is way smaller. The only thing that we didn't have a chance of stopping would be an N95. But everybody's okay with people wearing dew masks. That's a joke. It's like, a virus to somebody wearing their little cloth mask is like a dart thrown into an empty Olympic swimming pool. That's the size difference. It's a joke. But every measure put forth by big government is just absolutely necessary, no matter how illegal. There's not one case of a prominent person trying to get in front of as many cameras as they can, yelling about the destruction of rights or how we're going about this the wrong way. There's no dissenting voices. This is just creepy, folks. Number 14 is on the inconsistency of the government response, but in a little bit different way than what we've talked about. So, of course, this coronavirus threat and COVID-19 is the biggest thing of all time. But look at this hypocrisy. Lyme disease, for example. That's just one of 1,000 things. But Lyme disease has been devastating millions of people since around 1980. Not everybody's just simply cured after 14 days of doxycycline. If they get it late, there's a host of people suffering. It is kind of screwed up about 1 million people. All right, Lyme disease for a lot of different reasons, non-detection or diagnosis, things like that. So, well, the politicians and presidents and governors, and do these people place your health above all else as they appear to be now? Then why didn't they do similar things to combat Lyme disease or 10 other things? So, like, why don't they put all these sorts of measures in to protect your good health? Why don't they close national forests between May and September, the height of tick season in the Northeast? Close national and state forests because they don't want you to get Lyme disease. Why don't they mandate the spraying of off? You have to wear off. It's illegal. Governor Newsom's going to fine you, like they do mandate the mask. Well, Matt, they can't do that. We live in a free society. Well, they're doing it now. What's the difference? A year ago, people would have said, if I proposed what I just said, what do they close public forests and mandate off? And I'm a free American under the Constitution. Nobody can do these things to me. Well, they're doing it. But then there's sort of somebody screaming at me now that, Matt, they're decisions that only affect your health. They don't affect others. That's the difference. Really? The government doesn't dabble into areas where I can only harm myself. They don't try to put their constant laws and statute and code and ordinance in areas where I only can harm myself. You never have heard of a seatbelt law or a helmet law? Doesn't have drug laws, things like that. It will only impose its sticky fingers in areas where I could harm others. Did somebody just say that to me? 15. Don't you find it odd that during all of this lockdown and forced closures of thousands of businesses, that Netflix, Hulu, Prime, HBO Max, Disney, they didn't miss a beat in terms of the series that they produce or the movies they produce for their channels, their TV or streaming channels for the television. They didn't miss a beat. Okay, we've heard about a few movies that had to be pushed back, a few major motion pictures, but these series, the endless series on Netflix and Prime, it takes 1,000 times longer to produce all of that. So it's like, well, there's a few movies delayed, so somebody can just point to that and say, it did impact movie production. No, it didn't. The series on Netflix kept coming. The series on Prime kept coming. Why weren't they shut down? They were essential businesses. We didn't hear anything about that. They just kept coming. Well, Matt, they didn't keep coming. They were in the pipeline. Come on. No, they weren't. Nothing missed a beat regarding Hulu, Netflix, and all this stuff. They didn't miss a beat. The second season, even off Netflix and Hulu, the second season of Snowpiercer is about to start. There's no way it would be about to start now if they had to stop filming for 6 months or whatever. All of this was also done in California, supposedly to be the most restrictive state under Governor Newsom, whatever. The Gavinator, Governor Newsom, he's threatening to at certain times, arrest people for walking down the streets of San Francisco, leaving their home, threatening to turn the power and water off to a non-essential business that opens. They're threatened out of existence, but every single Hollywood studio that produces the series for Netflix and Amazon Prime is allowed to continue. Yeah, there's no hypocrisy here. Coronavirus is exactly as the news presents it to us. 16. How is it possible that one professional athlete in any sport that I know of, have I researched every single one? No, but this pretty much applies. Okay, maybe you'll find, again, one example to try to prove me wrong. Nobody had to take a pay cut. So you have these people in basketball, these absolute losers like Ben Simmons, can't even hit a jump shot. Ben Simmons makes well over $100 million. Joel Embiid, these bums are making easily, many of them making over $100 million. That's just the NBA. But no NBA team, no NHL team, NFL, baseball, none of them needed to tell their players to take a pay cut. So none of these sports needed fans to make any money. That was just extra money that came from fans. That wasn't in their business model at all. The money a fan would bring in, $50 a ticket, plus the parking, plus the hot dogs, and it's $7 a beer. They didn't need any of that money. See, if anything was real about the way this is being presented, there's just, guys, I don't know if this presentation is appropriate for me to tell you what I think. Obviously, there's something making people sick. It's being used. Okay, the whole underlying economy is being artificially supported with trillions of dollars printed through Fed central bank supercomputers. There's no way there wouldn't be. You'd have a few teams pop up in the NHL or the NBA saying we can't make payroll. You ever hear about this stuff? So they just don't need fans to pay everybody their and it's not like somebody could come forth, like 40 years ago and say, Matt, John Havlicek's only making $45,000 a year. They can do that. No, these guys are making $100 million a year. They would need the fans. And is anybody actually saying TV contracts to me? Yeah, the TV contracts are so much that if you lose all the fans for 2 seasons, everybody just keeps getting paid. No problem there. Yeah, just put on CNN. I'm sure everything that you hear on CNN is completely legitimate. These issues I bring up, must be some conspiracy jerk. 17, the hypocrisy of the bacterial resistance Gestapo via certain doctors for the past 20 years. My doctor in particular. 20 years we've heard from doctors and all sorts of people that antibiotics needs to be prescribed only at the last absolute resort because it has to be kept to a minimum to avoid bacterial resistance. It made sense at the time. You kill all the bacteria except the one that can make it through the antibiotic. That one could breed and you could develop a resistance. It makes perfect sense. But my doctor is huge. He wouldn't prescribe antibiotic under any circumstances unless he was 100% sure it was a bacteria and the antibiotic would actually work. Okay, he was antibiotic resistant, bacterial resistance Gestapo. Okay, now all of this just thrown out like in the last 10 months, nobody had a valid point in the last 20 years. Millions of gallons of hand sanitizer. You think that creates any bacterial resistance? Nah, just destroying the good bacteria all over their hands, millions of gallons of hand sanitizer. Where's all the dissenting voices? And maybe there have been a few that I missed. Again, but it isn't a big push. People should be talking like crazy about this use of hand sanitizer and bacterial resistance. But not too many people mention anything. Matt, this is a bigger crisis, and we all need to use gallons and gallons of hand sanitizer. We'll deal with the bacterial resistance some other time. We have a bigger crisis we have to face now. Okay. If that's how you want to explain it away, fine. That's basically the end. This presentation has been way too long for a big conclusion from me. I need to wrap it up. No, I'm not going to explain all of my personal thoughts in this matter. I've hinted at them in this presentation. All you do is call me a conspiracy theorist anyway. But please don't employ the script of, well, you must explain exactly what you mean with all your innuendos, Matt. You must show me the last page of the book. Why would they do that then if what you're suggesting is true? And you must show me the story's end. You know what? You're not ready for all of that. You're not ready for that. I've just shown you a massive list of things that don't add up, that don't make sense. Things that 8th graders in a homeroom, if we got them together for an hour, could come up with better decisions and better solutions to manage major parts of this coronavirus thing than your own government has. How it's violated almost every one of the Bill of Rights. There are reasons for all this. You need to find them out on your own. It starts with at least acknowledging that I've made some good points, that Matt, there's 5 parts of this presentation, I agree, that doesn't add up. Then you know what? It's your responsibility to look into it further and not just bow down to everything that comes on CNN. Thanks for listening.